Jacob Horn, welcome to Mint Season 7, all about creating content worth collecting. How you doing? Thanks for being on.
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing? You good?
I'm doing great, feeling good, fired up. Just came back from ETH Denver. I didn't see you there. Did you see things rolling on crypto Twitter?
One of my co-founders, Tyson, was there, and Ian, one of our protocol engineers, were there. They said it was amazing. So my FOMO was very high.
Did they give you any sort of, I guess, like topics of discussion that were trending at ETH Denver? Any narratives?
No, I haven't got the full debrief yet. I just got lots of photos of this like hardware workshop that like Ian was running, and then I think Tyson was enjoying the high altitude conversations and the high altitude physically. So it seemed pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, sick. Well, look, I'm super stoked genuinely to have you on. Big fan of Zora. For whatever reason, our audience overlaps with people who collect on Zora and the people who collect Mint podcasts. And I've noticed that anytime I create content around Zora or I have somebody from Zora, they love it. And the download count is actually significantly higher, funny enough. So I'm excited to see how this episode performs. I think, Jacob, a good place to start is for those who don't know you and don't know crypto, how do you actually introduce yourself to someone?
I say that my name's Jacob and I work in crypto. I'm pretty simple. I'm, I guess, one of the co-founders of Zora. Have been working on Zora for coming up on 3 years now. Before Zora, I worked at Coinbase. I was there for about 3.5 years. I had a pretty wild journey there. I started as like a design intern and then ended up kind of spearheading the stablecoin and USDC efforts internally within Coinbase. And that was a wild experience. Before Coinbase, I was building a bunch of wacky Ethereum projects that I was tweeting about in college, which is how I actually ended up at Coinbase, funnily enough. And then, that's the like 30-second introduction to about 10 years of being in crypto. There's a lot of depth to it, but that's the extremely high level thing.
Wait, how do you go from like building stablecoin projects and Ethereum wacky projects to then like spearheading or partly spearheading the crypto native creator economy?
That's a good question. I guess follow your nose a little bit and just like, I guess like maybe how I got into crypto was I honestly can't remember if it was my dad that got me into crypto or like a professor that was teaching computer science. But basically like Bitcoin was amazing to me. But what was even more amazing is that you could just create a currency out of the box. And the immediate spark that went off in my head was like, wait, you're telling me you could create a cryptocurrency for like any idea or like project? Like that's wild. So I started playing around with it from that perspective. And there was these things called colored coins at the time, which was built on Counterparty. Which
is that like another shit coin?
No. It was literally like, how do you start to build cryptocurrencies on top of Bitcoin? So if, like very rudimentary, like, I guess simultaneously NFTs and like fungible tokens, but it's built on Bitcoin, so literally impossible to build. Which is how like I kind of got immediately rabbit holed into Ethereum when that came out, because I was like, oh wait, this is literally 1,000 times easy to build on top of a public blockchain. So my kind of like, I guess, perpetual side project while I was in college was like, how do you use cryptocurrencies to capture the value of like creative projects, and just kind of like exploring like tokenizing anything around that. I was like tweeting about it a lot at the time. I kind of had the head of design at Coinbase reached out, and then Fred Asham, the co-founder, being like, hey, this is cool. There's not many people talking about Ethereum out of Sydney. Like, this is interesting. Like, let's catch up. And I guess that led to them being like, you should come to Coinbase and do a 3-month internship. And I was like, cool, I'll do a 3-month internship, learn everything I need to know about startups, go back to Australia and keep doing my like project. That 3 months turned into like 3.5 years. It was a pretty wild journey. I guess I started in design, which was interesting enough because I was coming from a computer science degree. But I guess within Coinbase, I was like a very strong advocate for pushing for the most like on-chain or like out there versions of what Coinbase could do, and had a few shots at that, which was like Coinbase should move into decentralized exchanges. We should think about like the core business and how that gets disrupted. And that was kind of like part of Coinbase's like 0x relay era, and then started to pay attention to Uniswap and bootstrapping a lot of liquidity for you like on there. And then, I guess stablecoins was something that kind of found a good alignment with Coinbase long term. So, it was like myself and 2 engineers got locked into a room for 3 months and helped build that into Coinbase.
Wow.
Alongside like Biology, flew out to Boston, did the deal with Circle, all that good stuff. And that was kind of like a big hero project from within. And
I guess so many scars. Like I'm like, wait, don't like stop. Like, let's cover that. But wait, I don't want to stop you. I'm like, you have so many layers. That's actually wild.
Yeah. And I guess like layer into that, protocols on Ethereum were just starting to like flourish. So like Uniswap was mind blowing to me because I was like, wait, this is a team of like 10 people who I think are going to structurally outcompete a like 1,200 person company. And I get the entire power of Coinbase with like a single function call. This is like totally mind blowing. And it happened to be well timed with like the Unisocks project, which I was like, oh, now we're starting to talk a little bit here. Cause it's like, we're getting into a creative project. Like this is fashion that happens to be using crypto. So my like side project that I did to like remix that was like, well, if you have an entirely trustless market on chain, you should be able to create a trustless brand on top of it. So I like spent the weekend creating like a Aragon DAO called Saint Fame. I made sure that DAO was like the trustless owner and creator of the Saint Fame shirt, which would be released the same way as socks. And that it was all trustless. There were like DAO members, all this kind of stuff. And then, that was kind of the early spark to Zora, and actually directly led to Zora in a lot of ways. Because no one cared about the DAO, funnily enough, but there was a lot of excitement around the creative token side. And that was kind of the spark. And I was like, oh, I can't stop thinking about this. This feels like the jumping off point.
When I had your co-founder Tyson on the podcast, he was talking about how the initial idea for Zora came about when you guys were all still at Coinbase. So that entire story, all those layers, that was while you were still working at Coinbase.
That was still, and doing things like through the first DeFi hackathon, had like Robert Leshner on the Compound team come in. We did like a Coinbase Compound Oracle, like all sorts of crazy projects coming along at the same time. And then, I met my other co-founder, D, while we were doing like one of the first, the first NBA partnership for Coinbase. Like flew out to Chicago for the NBA All-Star weekend, talking to them about crypto, all this kind of stuff. Like it was a really wild time, and a lot happened. And it felt like a decade-long career in like 3.5 years. It was kind of an awesome era for Coinbase, but it was all happening all at once, which was cool.
I want to talk to you about also the wacky Ethereum projects that you were building, but I also want to go a step further and explore your design side, because Zora has a very unique brand. And when I had Tyson on, I was asking like, what did the mood board for Zora look like? And he was like, oh, it was actually like community curated. Like we just threw a Figma link and a bunch of people threw ideas over there, and we kind of got to where we are today, or at least the initial start of Zora. But it seems as if you have a creative side to you. And I'm trying to understand like where does that start? Where does that stem from? Like, were you like the coloring book kid and you were just like always heads down with crayons? Is that your persona, or where does your interest for design come from?
That's a really good question. I guess I kind of was, but also wasn't the crayon kid. In that I loved the crayons, but like couldn't necessarily draw that well. Which shout out to Figma, obviously made life a lot easier for me. But I guess I've always had a really deep obsession with like the concept of brands and memes. And I feel like Zora actually started as more of a meme and a brand than it did a particular instance of an idea. Like for the first kind of like 3 months, Zora was just the moon emoji, me tweeting very kind of like esoteric and extremely high level statements. And then just like my favorite images that I was finding from like Tumblr, Arena, or what I'd curated from the internet. And yeah, so I guess, and I have very strong opinions about brand and like, I guess the design side. So it's something that probably to a lot of the people on the Zora team are probably annoyed that it's the case, but I'm still like reasonably involved very involved in the brand side and the design side. And I guess it's just something that's a passion of mine, and I happen to have strong opinions about it. So when those things overlap, it means I spend a lot of time on it.
So when you were building those wacky Ethereum projects, like what were the first few ones that you spent time doing?
The main one was called Horizon, which in a lot of ways is kind of what Zora is today, which is how do you have a creative idea or project, bring that on chain, create ownership in it. So the language I was using at the time was like create crypto equity in a film. And we're going to create a token around a film. It doesn't exist yet, but we know we all want to make it. So how do we create ownership in it that's native to the internet without having to create a company? Because keep in mind, I'm in Australia, and it's like, how am I going to create an Australian company that's going to have global impact? Like crypto was solving a very real problem where it's like I could collaborate with anyone around the world using crypto better than I could using the traditional system in Australia. And everything was really just like, honestly, remixes around the Horizon concept, which is like, at what level do you create ownership in? Is it the community level, an artifact level, so like a script, or like project level, so the final idea, and just kind of traversing up and down that stack using ERC20 tokens weren't even really a thing there. It was just like you create I can't remember what the form was, but yeah, that was the main thing, and just kind of playing around with those ideas. And keep in mind, this is probably like a 6 or 7 month window, so it really isn't that much time. And this is like end of 2015 through mid 2016.
Do you think your parents still know or have any clue about what you do? Like, do they get it?
My dad certainly does, because he's a brilliant engineer in his own right. So I think he's like one of the few people that can kind of go really deep and esoteric on it, and typically goes further than I can. And then my mom does too, I'd say. She owns some NFTs, and she gets it and loves entertaining the ideas around it. So yeah, it's more so like mother and father-in-law, maybe not so much. All immediate family around me, they're like, is Jacob selling shoes? Like, I really don't get it. They like the imagery. So that it's like the old school.
Jacob, I feel like, well, you just came back from maternity leave, and I feel like prior to maternity leave, you started the open editions trend. You basically kicked off the Jack Butcher's project, and you just left. You're like, all right, we'll come back in a month from now and we'll see what happens. Is that what went down? From an outsider's perspective, that looks like exactly what happened. Yeah,
well, I mean, maybe you could say that open editions as a form have been around for quite some time.
But timed open editions is something that you guys have been... Because that was like the whole concept, right? It was like a very low mint. It was a timed open edition. And it was something that you guys have been publicly talking about for a minute. But I feel like you're like, all right, I'm just going to throw this project out there. I'm going to work with Jack Butchers, and I'm just going to disappear for a month, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's funny. I can give my perspective. It's like our first timed open edition was New Year's Day 2022. It was the Zorb. And it was like, well, this is like an iconic part of our brand. Let's just make it free and it's fun. And then that kind of blew our minds, because it was like, wait, there's now 36,000 people that own this. And this was like a crazy experience. And this feels interesting. So all of last year, we were really going deep on our create tool, which was like, okay, how do we make it as easy as possible for people to do this themselves? And I guess like most things, you launch it, you kind of tinker away at it, you like invest a lot of time and energy into it, and it's just kind of like this. And then suddenly, people catch on, and then hockey sticks up and to the right, and you're like, oh, I guess that was always obvious, when in fact it was like, okay, there was a lot of months where we're just working, and there were like sparks, but didn't really take off to the extent that you could see it taking off. I would say Rainbow Zorbs happened in December, and that was like a step function increase in the scale of ownership. Like that was like 136,000 people. And then, with Jack Butcher and Checks, Jack just picked up the tool and ran with it. We didn't have to really do anything. I just saw him tweet it out. It was like 16,000 editions at $8. And then, this kind of insane journey over the next month where it's like, holy shit, he's pushing the limits of our tool in really interesting ways that we've now been building around, and got some cool releases coming so everyone can do similar things.
Share more about that. Like what were the interesting insights that arose from that experiment that you're now tinkering with at Zora?
The metadata updates.
Okay.
It's basically like Jack, and that's a nerdy way of saying the image changed. So like we make it really easy in our tool where if you create an edition, you can just like press a button and change the image or the video or the music that's being displayed on your NFT. And that was mostly just because maybe you make a mistake, you want to edit it or update it and refine it. But Jack started to push that to the limit conceptually, which was like, wait, I kind of have created this like $50 million billboard, which is a direct channel to people who hold this NFT in their wallet, view it on Zora, view it on OpenSea, view it everywhere. And it's kind of like this big TV that he has like control over and a direct channel to his audience with. And he's updated it, I think, like close to 15 times with some like really cool remixes and overlaps and collabs and all that kind of stuff. So that is something we've double clicked on, and have got some new protocol features that are coming around it, which is like, let's assume that people do start to use NFTs as more of this kind of like channel. What kind of new protocol features can you build around that to create a longer lasting experience and ownership within each update and all that kind of stuff? So, yeah, I won't go too much into it, but like that's the one area that's been like really fascinating to see. And then I think Jack's been a trailblazer and kind of like normalizing and making open editions seem like really attractive to a lot of creators in the space. And, you know, like maybe this is actually the internet native form of ownership for content. And it just seems like the way for you to like capture the ownership and value and attention that happened to be there at the time, and then create a really interesting kind of market and value system around a piece of content after the fact. So
let's dive into that thought really quick, because I first want to talk to you about, what do you think sort of changed from the first era of open editions and the Nifty Gateway era to now what I call, like, I don't know, at the time it was more digital art, but now you're seeing video, you're seeing photography, you're seeing music, you're seeing a bunch of other forms of content and sort of get it tokenized in the either timed or unlimited time, I guess, timed open edition format. Like, what do you think are the differences between those two eras, and how do you think they've sort of complemented each other?
Well, the biggest difference is that it wasn't easy for everyone to just create an open edition. You'd have to work with Nifty, you have to get accepted into their pipeline, get a date on their calendar, and you know, it wasn't readily available to someone who didn't know how to write smart contracts to actually create an open edition. So I think the tooling and accessibility is like a huge factor. And I think that has a bunch of downstream implications, and is like kind of the main change. And then, two, I would say, there's been a general, I think, shift. And it's like, of course, we're going to put, you know, capital A art on chain, and this is an amazing medium for it. But now it's like, what does it look like to actually put all of the content that we would usually post on YouTube or Instagram or Spotify? It's like, well, I'm putting them on these like Web2 platforms. Why didn't I put it on Ethereum? And I get like a lot of new benefits that crypto offers, as well as a lot of the, mainly like the value capture side, and then a bunch of other longer term things like provenance and it's platform agnostic and all these features. So I think, I guess to kind of summarize, the two big shifts would be like, it's actually really easy to do it. Costs like $3 in 2 minutes to like create an edition. And then two, I think like both creators and collectors are realizing that it's just as exciting to collect content as it is like capital A art. You know what I mean? So I think those have been the two big shifts.
So the whole theme for season 7 is creating content that's worth collecting. I'm curious, how do you understand that statement?
It's a big statement. How I understand it is an interesting question. I guess the things that come to mind is that, like, I think Ethereum and public blockchains are a 10x improvement on content ownership for the internet. And it's a 10x for creators. It's like a 0 to 1 moment. Like if you're a up and coming YouTuber, it's very hard for you to make any money from YouTube. You're not going to get like Mr. Beast style creator payments or even anything for a really long time. But if you can make $10 to $100 from your creators like very early, crypto like allows for that, and then builds in all of the crypto superpowers, which there might be long-term upside if this thing is actually a viral thing in the future or like really important and notable. So that's the first thought there. And then, I guess maybe we could double click on anything within that. But to me, content worth collecting is kind of like part of this broader shift too, where it's like, if you're going to zoom out 30,000 feet or like 100,000 feet, the entire internet is like ads based. And and that has just, obviously decades worth of downstream effects on how we interact with the internet, how we value things on the internet, what types of thing gets incentivized to create on the internet. So what does it look like to shift to like a collectible style model, which is, if your value capture as a creator is now based on a different value system, which might be different to going viral, it's actually about coming collectible. Do we see an incentive system that leads to higher quality content, or content that's not meant to like hijack your attention, but is actually to have some other type of long-term resonance or like impact that could lead to a better internet long-term? Obviously, it's a really idealistic and optimistic view, but I think that's
I'll
actually
take
part of the shift. Yeah.
So you talked about like the rate in which creators post content on TikTok. You have to post like 5 times a day, just to even get any recognition from the algorithm, or so they say, right?
Yeah.
But what you're sort of like explaining is that it shouldn't be that way, or it could be that way, but there's a different form of consumption.
All of the above. It's like, so yeah, let's say you're a creator and you want to distribute your podcast, and you want to do it in a way that your community can have access to it. It has the ability to expand its audience over time. And then ideally you can make a living off it, or a really great living off it. So I think if you look at, and if you assess each platform, let's put like YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, and Ethereum as a platform and your options there, with Ethereum being the odd one out. So if you put yours on any of those 3 traditional platforms, it's like it's being monetized either via subscriptions or advertising. So for the end user, a lot of times their experience is hijacked by having to pay that price for subscription or paying attention via advertising. So that's not great. And then 2, there's a lot of algorithm in between you and that end user, or that community member that wants to enjoy your content. So if we kind of like talk about Ethereum now, it's like if you put it on chain, one, there is now a way for your community to like find that directly, have it uninhibited by a paywall or an advertising wall. And I feel like that's a really big little detail that like goes a really long way. Like universally free and accessible content that's ad free and subscription free is something that's unlocked by the NFT value system. And that you get that from Ethereum. And now if your community really loves that content and they want to collect it, they have a way to, pay you as Adam, whatever the price is, to collect that as an NFT, keep it in their wallet. It's kind of like an on-chain save or an on-chain like. And now you've earned value that you wouldn't have otherwise earned on those 3 platforms. And then the really new thing is like fast forward 5 years, let's say it's like a really important or like historic podcast. That thing that was worth $8 might be now worth 500 or 800 or like 80, whatever it might be. It could be worth more than it was at the time of minting. So now you've got this like, kind of collective value capture story for both the creator and both the community, which is like really new. And one thing I like to say is like creators are already creating their content as NFTs. Those NFTs are just entirely hidden and owned by Facebook and Google, and they sell them on an ad exchange instead of being sold on like Zora or OpenSea in the backend. So it's like you're already minting NFTs every day. You just don't really know it because they're keeping it hidden from you and monetizing it, basically behind the back of their like massive platforms. So it's like, why should they own it when you can? And this is the system to do it.
Well, part of why they should own it, and you can create an argument, is they have really good distribution and discoverability and building virality, right? Which Web3 very much lacks. There's different applications and protocol, like Lens protocol, trying to tackle it, right? Trying to merge the Web2 distribution and Web3 value capture under one roof. But we're building towards that, right? What do you think is, number one, like the best example of on-chain distribution and virality? And 2, what's missing for us to kind of get the TikTok level virality distribution that a lot of creators actually put a lot of emphasis on, that's important to them?
Yep, that's a really great question. Well, I guess empirically the best examples of this so far are probably being CryptoPunks and Base Eth. Like they are both things that exist on chain that went viral outside of the realms of crypto to some extent, and then I think had like value capture that resembled that. Within the content space, maybe Checks is actually one of the first examples of this, where that was a meme that, or an artwork that, or a piece of content that Jack would have posted on Instagram or Twitter, as he had for years but he happened to mint it first and then post it second. And then we got to see the dynamics of, well, if it actually exists as an NFT first before it goes viral, you're able to capture all of that value back into the NFT as he did. So maybe that's the first inkling. And then I guess your second question, like how do we actually build this distribution natively on chain over time? This is something we've been thinking about a lot. I think our experience is kind of resembling this thinking, which is you actually need to create a really good viewing and enjoyable experience for NFTs, which is like, hey, instead of making NFTs always like show up in this marketplace format where you're buying and selling them like trading cards, what does it look like to actually find the most enjoyable content that exists on Ethereum and then present it in a way where someone can actually watch it, listen to it, view it as easily and as nicely as they could on a traditional social media platform? It just happens to be built on this like extremely powerful crypto stack under the hood, which comes with all these other benefits.
So in Zora's case, it's the infinite scroll that you guys recently implemented on the homepage, right?
Yeah, that's the first version. And I think what we're now building out is like, how do we get better search and discovery that is not market focused, it's more content focused and creative focused. And then how do you start to like, instead of searching like profiles in like a marketplace context, it's profiles in like, wait, show me what they've created and who else has collected this. And like, there is this amazing and rich social graph that exists on Ethereum already, even though it's nascent. How do we actually just start revealing it in that way instead of just always packaging up as like sort by floor or sort by trading, which is important, but it's not like the core thing that it's not, I don't think that's going to be the difference between content living on chain and content living on social media. Like obviously it's a crucial and huge unlock, but I think we need to start building experiences that make it easy to experience the content on Ethereum first instead of second, I guess.
I feel like the most obvious next step from a collector and a creator's perspective is when I come to Zora, I connect my wallet, you guys detect what's in my wallet and present me a curated feed that's like an infinite scroll accordingly. I don't know if you guys do that right now. It's just like what you guys curate.
Right now, the first version was just most recent. But yeah, I think as of, well, the team might kill me, but I think it's March 13th. It's going to be our first algorithm that's trying to do exactly what you're describing. And then I think like a novel thing we're doing is we're actually going to be minting and open sourcing that algorithm from day one to try and like, one, it's just like, I think that's like a very crypto way to do it. And then two, it actually opens up some really cool things where it's like, well, what if you bring your own NFT with an algorithm in it and we can just look at it and start to like have a much more dynamic and open market for that kind of personalization.
When you say mint the algorithm, do you mean just like a text file that you tokenize?
Literally like the text file. Okay. And then it's like, hey, if everyone wants to see what how this is being ranked, like here it is. Like we're not going to try to hide it or like whatever. People might try and game it, and then that's fine. We'll have a new iteration. But it's literally just like here is the algorithm that is basically a JSON file that gives us a bunch of like factors and weights, and this is how we're going to look at Ethereum and interpret it.
On the topic of on-chain data, the thing that's most exciting for me is understanding who my community of collectors are and then creating content and ways to engage with them and ways to monetize using that information. Because right now, I'm the platform in Web3. I build a community of collectors. I can take them to Zora, to Sound, to Lens, and the list goes on and on and on. And with that comes a plethora of insights of understanding who these people are. So I feel like more creators have yet to have that aha moment, specifically Web2 native creators, and seeing what the potential of Web3 holds beyond monetization. Now that data is transparent, there's a layer of like consuming that data and creating unique experiences for your audience around that data. And it seems as if Zora is trying to tap into that approach as well for curating really cool things for collectors. I'm curious, like, what are Web2 native creators missing? Like, what are they missing from that aha moment that's going to allow them to enter Web3? For me, I feel like it's the data and it's the elements of monetization. But even with the monetization, I feel like they don't care. Like they can't build viral audiences and become the Hollywood superstars that they want to be using their creative endeavors that they can do now on other social platforms. Yeah,
there's actually a high level thing. If you imagine a Venn diagram of content that's viral and content that's actually collectible, there aren't many creators in Web2 that actually fit in the middle of that Venn diagram.
Right.
Like the top creators of Web2 are the top creators because they've learned how to cater to that value system. where it's like the most viral creators in Web 2 might not be creating the most collectible content. Or said another way, it's like there's a lot of Instagram posts or TikToks that even though they have millions of views, I don't know if they would have a large collector base because maybe they're really not that important. Or they're not going to resonate on the level at which I actually want to collect them. I'm happy to watch it, but I'm not happy to collect it.
But you're assuming that's a paid collect, not a free collect.
Yeah, I guess I'm assuming it's a paid collect.
Because liking something on TikTok is very analogous, and it ending up in your favorites folder is very analogous to collecting something and it being added to your wallet.
Well, yeah, there's another nuance there where it's like likes on TikTok are private, right? They're not public. So it's like, I think that's part of the story too. But I think generally speaking, what holds up Web 2 creators is I think there's a misconception that by putting it on Ethereum, you're not allowed to put it on other platforms, which obviously isn't the case. I think like what we say is like mint it first and then distribute it as far and wide as you possibly can on every platform that you care about, because you will still get value capture on those traditional systems, but more importantly, you should get most of it back into the NFT. So I think that's a common misconception. The second is I think there's still like a bit of a hangover from the like pre-proof of stake, greenhouse gas kind of wave that happened with like one of ones and the early kind of crypto art mania that happened. So I think that's still a somewhat of a hurdle. Third is I just think a lot of people just don't like the aesthetics of crypto art as it is, and they associate like, well, if I'm seeing all of this stuff, it doesn't necessarily resonate with me. Like I'm going to put it onto ETH and no one's going to care, which again isn't necessarily the case. And yeah, I think that they're the biggest ones. And then 4 is they just don't know they can actually do that. it's like a lot of people know what NFTs are. A lot of people's first reaction to NFTs is like, oh, they're kind of whack or like nerdy. I don't care about that. And then it's like, yeah, why should I care? I just don't think there's many good examples of people earning the value they probably should be from their content using that system. But obviously that's changing and will become more known over time as there's podcasts like yours and more examples like Jack Butcher or Latasha or whoever from the space. So yeah, it'll happen. It's like one of those gradually then suddenly things.
I feel like creators are still missing like their killer feature, killer product. That's very much so Web3 native, crypto native. Yeah. Do you think like NFTs are the end all be all solution and it's just a matter of time of innovating around those token primitives? Or do you think there's something in the near future that doesn't really like capture the needs and wants of creators entirely just yet, that is yet to be created in Web3?
It's more likely than not that there is room for innovation at the protocol level and maybe even at the token standard level. I think, we could look up 5 years from now and it's like, 721s and 155s. Like that's some OG stuff that, kind of these old relics. Like I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Although I'd say like they are pretty good. And that, there's a lot of room at the platform. I think like it's really a lot of platform innovation that's required. I feel like if we're moving, generally speaking, away from like a collectibles dominant market to a content dominant market, I think a lot of the UX and platforms that existed in the prior kind of like growth cycle, like likely irrelevant moving forward. So I think like it could be the case that the whole marketplace era was actually like the kind of V1 skeuomorphic approach and it's a good bridge and it put one foot in front of the other. But really now it's about like, well, what types of new discovery and like consumption experiences can we start to build around this content now that it's NFT native instead of social media platform native? And I think like maybe some data in favor of that is just like by creating an edition take like 2 minutes and like feel kind of similar to like posting a tweet or uploading a video to YouTube. We've seen a lot more creators do it and like go back and do it. So I think it's helped move the needle on the creator side a little bit. But I think now it's like, we've always got to improve on the creator side and then similarly on the collector side. It's like, how do we help them enjoy and collect that content in a way that feels native to crypto and easy? So yeah.
That's interesting. I want to talk to you about Bitcoin NFTs.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
The giggle. You're like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on Ordinals, NFTs that are minted on Bitcoin? Any insights? Is Zora moving in that direction at all?
We had a project called Chainspace.app. I think they sold like 200 ETH worth of NFTs on Ethereum that had a unique way of bridging Ordinals and ETH NFTs together. It's kind of like a big throwback for me because it's like there were Rare Pepes were like one of the most significant projects on Bitcoin, like pre-Ethereum, and they were essentially Bitcoin NFTs in like 2013 through 2015. So it's like, okay, like what's new here is like, and then, yeah, I honestly haven't thought about it that much. It's like one of those things where it's like, maybe it's a blind spot, but the fact that there is not the ability to create smart contracts on Ethereum, on Bitcoin, just seems to me just like fundamentally limits the interestingness of what you can do with NFTs on Bitcoin. Like I saw like a Google Sheet was being used as a marketplace for Ordinal Punk. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like it's already topped out of what you can do. This is just like my spicy takes. Like this is some great Bitcoin code, but like build some smart contracts.
So rumor has it, part of ETH Denver, like one of the narratives that I was hearing is like Bitcoin NFTs are the next thing. And like, that's one of the points of subjects people were talking about. And rumor has it that Stacks may be revealing something at the end of the month that may be a version of smart contracts on Bitcoin. And and I wonder what that's going to enable.
Yeah. I wonder.
We'll leave it at that. You're like, you're not so skeptical. You're not so it's not so promising, but, okay.
It's like all things in crypto. It's like they come and go. I'm very happy to be wrong, but it's like a look at it. If it's still here in 6 months, it's probably a big deal. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. What about music NFTs? Do you think they found product market fit?
Well, probably not yet. I think music NFTs are always this insane. It's like, how has it not worked yet is always the thing for me, because it's like, wait, music has had the most tumultuous history on the internet since day one. And I think NFTs are literally like the triple kickflip solve all the issues of music on the internet, yet it's struggled. I think it's like early. I think like sound and catalog have done an amazing job of pushing it forward. But for whatever reason, collectors haven't got their head around, like, I can't see it. Like, maybe, yeah. I guess
why is that? Why not? Like, why don't you think they see it?
I love music NFTs because it's like, well, great. Like, music has always wanted to be free on the internet, but artists and the musicians should absolutely be getting value capture from what they're creating. And it's like NFTs do both of those things at once. It's free for the entire internet to consume, but it unlocks value capture for the musicians because collectors are willing to, buy and collect their work and trade them, and all the value capture that goes back to the musicians as a result of that. I think, I don't know. I've been collecting music NFTs for a while and I've always loved them. I think when I've spoken to collectors about it, they're just like, but I can't see it. And then I think there's always these downstream things where it's like, I can't easily share music as easily as I can on Twitter. I can't save it to my phone as like easily as I can as an image to like my camera roll. Like, I think there's some just like little UX around the edges that like can add up a lot. But I think it's inevitable. I think like we'll look up and sound and or catalog will be looked at as like very ahead of their time and probably on the money for using the NFT form for music. It just, seems to be taking longer than I would have expected.
I know a lot of the early music NFT trends started on Zora. Like same thing with podcasts. It seems like a lot of the early forms of media, before they have their semi breakout moments, they kind of appear on Zora first. Why do you think that is?
It's because we have a very flexible platform. We have essentially unbounded file size limit. So it's like, and then we just let you mint multiple file types. I think a lot of tools that are out in the space are like very true to one media type, typically images. I think for us, we basically, since our first version of the NFT tool, it was like, we want you to be able to do text files, basically any file, like text files, PDFs, websites, videos, music. Like we just want to be able to account for all file types, because it kind of makes sense that NFTs will eventually find their way into supporting any file type. So that means it's like, yeah, we usually see the first instances of a file type show up on Zora, because it's like, yeah, you just upload it and press go. I think there was like, I remember RAC was maybe created the sixth ever NFT on Zora, and that was like a song called "The Legend of Zora." And it's like this like awesome like 30-second track. But yeah, we see a lot of the first instances show up.
How much is that worth? What's the floor on that?
I don't know. It was a 1 of 1, and I remember I collected it in like RAC token. I saw it, yeah, because that was at a time where it was like maybe bidding in ERC20s is cool, so I bid in like RAC token, and yeah, that obviously we've seen ETH only since then. But yeah,
why is that? I remember Creator Coins had a moment like 2 years ago. They were hot, like the RAC coin, the Alex coin, these like personal branded tokens, and being able to buy into a creators community using their ERC20. Why do you think that's slowly sort of died down?
Because I think NFTs were a better form for it. It's like it's cool to be able to buy it. Like one, the link between the ERC20 and the creator is like tenuous. It's like, what am I actually buying here? Versus with the NFT, it's like, oh, I own this song, or I own this like image, or I own this video. It's like, it's very explicit, and it doesn't require any trust to kind of like create a value system there. So I think like ERC20s were just like an early attempt at bringing the crypto value system across into that creator context. And I think it's an experiment that didn't play out because NFTs were the better form for it. So yeah, I just kind of put it in that bucket of like good early attempt at the experiment, and directionally correct, but in practice was wrong.
Part of highlighting a specific value system brings me into the conversation of Nouns, and one of your favorite communities on the internet, and also very much home to Zora, like very native to Zora. You guys kind of like purchased a significant, I guess, amount of NFTs from the Nouns ecosystem. And I remember when I had Tyson on, he was like, all right, we can't talk about this publicly yet, but this is what we're doing. This is what we're planning. And we're shooting the shit around different Nouns related ideas and features and whatnot. And it's come a long way. And I want to highlight really quick a tweet that you pushed on the internet on Twitter, February 24th, 2023. I can see a million different ways that Nouns can augment and disrupt the protocol in crypto space, but I get much more excited by its potential as a creative universe and as a collective internet scale art project. So anybody that's not native to crypto, let alone Nouns, will be super confused what you're talking about. So let's dive into that tweet, but let's first start about what is Nouns? What is Nouns? What is this ecosystem? How do you rationalize the Nouns ecosystem? And then we'll take it from there.
I think, put simply, Nouns is it's a DAO. It's an NFT project. It's a organizational form factor. They're like my 3 high level things, which are super broad. Doesn't really tell you much. I think, yeah, shit. All right, let's dive in. So I think like Nouns to me, it caught my attention originally just because it had really interesting people, and it was actually a fork of the Zora auction house. It combined like the Zora auction house with the compounds Governor Bravo and then NFTs, and just combined the ability to govern a treasury, an NFT, and a perpetual auction into this like one machine. And I remember looking at it, and I actually felt kind of jealous because it's like, holy shit, I think this just stuck the landing on like what I've always wanted to see and try and do in crypto since, starting, which is like, wait, I think this might be the way to create ownership in something really big and broad. And it's basically like, this is a mechanism that allows anyone around the internet to collaborate around the shared idea and then allocate capital towards that. So the way that Nouns works is that there's one NFT sold every day. The ETH from that NFT goes into a treasury, and that treasury is governed by the NFTs. So one NFT, one vote. So if I can use CryptoPunks as like a working analogy here to kind of help illustrate that, CryptoPunks Well, actually, let's do base C because they actually sold it for ETH. Base C,
Okay.
they sold their apes for, it was like 0.1 ETH. That ETH all went to Yuga. And then Yuga was kind of entrusted with the ownership of the IP and the ETH to forward that ecosystem as far and wide as they possibly can. And they did a really good job of that, by the way. And that was kind of like the structural foundation of the 10K PFP era, which had some problems, which was like the devs do something meme is kind of the perfect encapsulation of what goes wrong with that model, which is you have, thousands of people who hold an NFT that actually have no power to work together to push forward that project. They have to point to that trusted, very small team to release and utilize that IP, like the art and the brand, and then spend that ETH to forward it. So you as an individual member, it's kind of like this tragedy of the commons in a way where it's like, I don't necessarily have the individual incentive to spend the thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to put a mural in Soho or to like create a fashion brand or do any creative project. And in fact, in most cases, you're restricted because the IP is owned by the team. So Nouns is kind of, I think, best thought of as like a kind of CryptoPunks 2.0 or a solution to that 10K PFP problem, which is instead of devs do something, it's DAO do something. And it's like, oh shit, I'm part of that DAO. And I have every right and ability to push forward this project by putting forward proposals to the DAO for them to vote on. And by the way, all of the IP is completely public domain. So you don't even need to get approval from the project to use the art and use the branding and anything associated with it. So yeah, I guess that's the structural difference. And then I guess there's a million ways. There's so many dimensions to it. Like there's the fact that brand is public domain. It's the fact that its value capture system is like, I think, entirely derived from its meme. So that puts it in a really interesting position to do types of projects I don't think any traditional company or even DAO prior to this point has been able to fund sustainably. And that the one net result of that is like, this might be the crypto native version of like Disney Studios. And I'm like, and this ties into like the content world in a way, because it's like, wait, Nouns is starting to realize that part of its flywheel is to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to incredible animation studios to just produce amazing films and then release them as collectible NFTs on the other end. And now they've figured out this like sustainable economic loop to produce amazing film. Like that's kind of insane. And that's just one dimension of it. So how it relates to Zora is, I guess, one, I think we like to take the most powerful primitives that we see in the space or think of ourselves and like make it as easy as possible for people to run with. So that led to Nouns Builder. It's like, we want to see more Nouns style DAOs out in the space. How do we remove the barrier to entry to knowing how to deploy a relatively complex set of smart contracts to do that? And then two, I guess as a long-term speculative bet where it's like, if this kind of crypto Disney dynamic plays out and it becomes it does become an internet scale art project that's producing amazing films and art and media and projects that find its ways into NFTs. We want to support that, become a member of that organization, and provide the infrastructure on the other side to actually do that. So it's like Zora can be kind of like a lot of the plumbing and infrastructure that helps Nouns mint these things in NFTs in what we think is the best way possible. And we're incentive aligned with DAO because we put a decent amount of money into the organization to align ourselves with it. So yeah, that's a lot, but that's like the high level of Zora, Nouns, and how it works and why I think it's interesting.
What do you think are the more like human-based values that Nouns encompasses that more people can relate to outside of crypto?
It's fun, and yeah, that might be it. It's like, well, I guess I was going to say Dogecoin is another, but that's a crypto example where it's like Doge was interesting because it's an entirely meme-based currency. And it kind of found its stride once the Dogecoin subreddit kicked off, and it was like, let's just spend Doge to help the Jamaican bobsled team compete in the Olympics because that's like fun and entertaining. And that works because it makes the meme more recognizable. It's kind of hilarious, entertaining, which meant the value of the token went up, which means it could fund more things. But obviously the Dogecoin currency didn't have like Nouns is basically like almost a structural solve to Dogecoin as well. To put it in simple terms, what Nouns means is if you have an idea that you think will just be widely received as a good thing for the world, Nouns is probably more likely to fund that than not, because it has an economic model that allows it to benefit from that. So it's like there are a lot of projects that are funded by the Nouns ecosystem, which is like, let's help malnourished communities in Africa, like where they need to get their resources that, they can clean up and get some good food and all that kind of stuff. And Nouns is willing to fund that because it thinks it's good for the world. And the more that Nouns is associated with good things, the more notable the brand, which means the more valuable the NFT, which means the more good things it can do. So that's on like the kind of, I guess, really literal and charitable side. And then there's a spectrum of like, from that all the way to like Red Bull style stuff where it's like, what's just the most outlandish and crazy moments that we can create that capture a lot of attention and capture a lot of imagination that Nouns can fund and be associated with. Because again, the more notable it is, the more money it gets, the more things it can do. So Nouns is kind of this, I guess, like new form of organization that has a value capture model that continues to thrive so long as it's doing things that are broadly accepted as good for people, because if it's good, then it's a good brand, which means it gets more money, and then that's the loop. Which sounds like, I guess, simple and kind of strange, but yeah, that's right. Kind of what's happening there.
Are there any projects that you have yet to see be created that kind of fit into your creative moment capture idea that you just sort of talked about? Like anything you wish the Nouns would sort of produce or members of the Nouns ecosystem would fund that have yet to be funded?
I mean, there's a lot of things, yeah.
What's the most compelling thing that's on your mind?
That's a good question. The most compelling thing that it could probably do in the short term is just find traction. And the pitch to like any traditional or any creatives really is like, hey, you basically have complete creative control over the work that you want to create. All you have to do is use the Nouns creative universe. So like the characters, which are really expansive characters. And I think you can even push the limit in the form. Like it doesn't have to be pixel form. There's kind of creatives that already pushed it into, cartoons, but I think you could even just take visual cues and go into live action where it's a like 3% nounish in aesthetic, but if there's a story that you want to tell and package up and you have like a good sense of what it would cost and how long it would take, I think like the DAO would genuinely entertain that. And it might be easy to get funded by Nouns than it is like selling to Netflix or a Universal or something like that. I think a little more out there is, I guess, and this is within the crypto world, like I think Nouns is in a unique position to fund the creation of new public protocols because it doesn't have an economic model that relies on fees. I think it could create public and free protocols that can solve a lot of like problems we're seeing in maybe the NFT space and stuff like that. And again, for like developers, it's a similar story. You have like complete control over what you build. It just has to have Nouns branding on it. And then in the real world, I think like, yeah, I think it's like playgrounds feels like an interesting one. It's like, can Nouns just like generally speaking improve the quality of playgrounds and just like put 50 to 100K towards a bunch of playgrounds around
playgrounds?
Yeah, I think it can be as weird and as
get them while they're young.
Yeah. See, I think it can do a lot of things.
Okay,
and that's kind of the point. It is like it's literally as expansive as we can think. It really doesn't have that much of a constrained mandate, which is part of why it's interesting.
Let's transition out of Nouns for a minute. Okay, I want to talk more about you actually. A while ago, I think it was like a year or so ago, you released this hyperstructure article, kind of like explaining what a hyperstructure is, future of hyperstructures, where Zora fits into that thesis and whatnot. Are there any half-baked ideas that you're tinkering with right now that you have yet to publish?
Yes, I basically have. Yes, there's a lot.
Let's talk about them.
I'm trying to sort through ones that they're not building as to.
Like, what keeps you up at night? I know you're one of those people that just constantly thinks about the space and thinks about it very creatively and critically. What's been on your mind that's been sort of bogging you down recently? In a positive way, of course.
I think the thing I mentioned earlier around the metadata updates. So when I wrote the hyperstructures essay, that was actually, I had COVID. I was basically in a fever dream. I had like 3 big ideas that came from that, which was like the hyperstructures essay and then 2 other ones. One of them was this basically channels concept that I mentioned to you earlier, which is like when we released Zorbs, we had 36,000 wallets and collectors that held the Zorb. But because we built it in an immutable way, there was no way to update and communicate to people. So the big thing was like, wait, how all we have is Twitter to communicate with these 36,000 holders. And that's very lossy for a bunch of reasons. Like, I wish we could just talk through the Zorb and start to build a network on chain and these more like dynamic and living NFTs that allows us to basically communicate through the NFT itself. And I think with timed open editions and metadata updates, we're like 2 out of 3 steps at the protocol level to, I think, unlocking what I think could be like a really compelling form factor for creators to basically build a channel on chain. So I guess what the part of that keeps you up at night is like, I think that NFTs need to be way more dynamic than we view them. And I was kind of a purist, and when we were building Zora too, it's just like, it has to be immutable. These NFTs are like a one-time thing. It's just the same image or the same media that you're looking at. But I think more recently, it's like, no, I think these NFTs are much more living things, and we should be treating them much more like websites or like on-chain TVs than we should static images that don't change forever. So I think that's been like a long-running thought.
Why is that? Why should we treat them more like TVs and websites than static images?
Partly because we can, and it's like, and then partly because there's just a ridiculous amount of, I feel like, underutilized distribution. Like with timed editions, we're seeing NFTs with thousands of holders hold these things, and then all they can do is like look at it once. But it's like, I feel like the distance of being able to like punch through that and allow you to say, like, start to communicate directly through those NFTs with your community feels like a way more compelling solution than having to go through Twitter all the time or any other platform. Like, you literally have a direct line to every one of your collectors. It just happens to be blocked by the fact these things are mostly immutable. So it's just like that just feels like that to me is like, I think that might be the next like year of rapid experimentation for us, which is like, what does it look like to treat these NFTs more as living objects that creators create a longer and more like constant relationship through versus always having to release a new NFT all the time. So that's like a big running thread. And then the third, which I guess overlaps with Nouns, which is how do you actually just create pure ownership in memes and organize around a meme? And I think Nouns like solved that problem. It's just going to take a long time for us to realize that they solved that problem with the mechanism. But I think about that a lot with the Zorb and like Zora, because it's like Zora was created, there weren't any compelling DAO models. I tried with Aragon. We'd seen a couple of ERC20 DAOs. They weren't particularly exciting or productive or seemed like good to me. So I think it's like, what does it meaningfully look like for Zora as an organization to go on chain has always been a big question. Like, I don't want to launch a token. I want to launch an org that can like work and function. And I think there's a really big difference between those two things. And I think Nouns is a good first shot at it, but I think there's even room to experiment and like push the limits of that model as well. So that's something I think about a lot, because I think I'd rather Zora be on chain than off chain, just for a whole bunch of reasons. But it's
regarding the first one, being able to update NFTs and create dynamic experiences, treating NFTs as websites and these dynamic things that live on the internet. I feel like that's challenging, especially in today's market, because creators are really in between the marketplace wars and creator royalties being stripped. I feel like we need to see more innovation on primary sales and then being able to capture more of that initial drop than really innovating on the secondary sale. If you predicate your entire experience on like that primary sale and try to tie on experiences around the dynamicness of an NFT, you kind of lose the monetization factor that comes with the secondary sale. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking about this too rigidly, and I haven't experienced all possible, I guess, like avenues of what this could be.
Yeah, maybe we should have done this podcast a month from now and we'd launched it. But I think the pot, so it's like, yes, I think it cannibalizes the secondary, but I think it unlocks way more value capture in the primary. So it's like, instead of having to try and monetize the volatility of your NFT, which is kind of whack, generally speaking, anyway, because it's like, I think it misaligns incentives between the creator and the community. It's like, what does it mean to actually skew to a perpetual primary market and then create moments within it to build scarcity? I would rather just show this. Maybe we bookmark this part of the podcast and we pick it up when it's actually live. But yeah, I think it's way more simple than it sounds. And then the net result is that, I think creators can actually have a true on-chain network with their community that they can broadcast their work out to, and then allows for their communities to collect within each of the moments that they're basically changing. So, if you really, that's the high level.
That's like super vague, but also like very detailed.
I'm going to keep it vague because I always get in trouble for there's been I share a lot of ideas too early, so I'm going to keep it vague and let us build it, and then I can just we can come back to it maybe in the future. But
I'd consider you like an original thought leader in the space. Like, you really have your own thoughts that people rally behind. I'm curious, what does your creative process look like, and your thought process of coming to statements that you end up kind of like rallying your entire team around to build towards? Like, how do you develop original thoughts in Web3 and think so critically the way you do? I'm trying to think. I feel like it's such a unique skill set and so difficult to come behind. Like, I even have a hard time asking that question, like, because it's a weird question to ask. I feel like you have your own thoughts, you have your own way of looking at the world, and through that you come to your unique ideas as a team, right? And push the spectrum forward.
Well, I'll take it as a very nice compliment, first of all, but I guess part of my process is I try and use everything and push it to the limit. So it's like, I just love using something the second it comes out, and then sitting there. I love to try and predict everyone's roadmap, basically. It's like, if I was in someone else's shoes as a builder, like, what would I build? What do I dislike about what they've built? What do I really like about what they've built? And if I was in their driver's seat for the next 6 months, what would I do? And like, when I look at any tool in the space or any protocol or anything like that, I'll basically use it and then put myself in those shoes, just because I love thinking about that, because it's such an interesting state of mind to be in. It's like, if you're in Hayden's shoes at Uniswap, what would your next 6 months look like? If you're in Devin's shoes at OpenSea, like, what would you do for the next 6 months? Likewise, Blur. And I think you can just kind of...
Sorry, excuse me.
Well, maybe. But it's like... so I think that's part of just like... That's what I do every day. I'm on the internet. I'm just like, I'll use something and I don't try and think about like, okay, where's the edges and what would I do for the next 6 months given this point? That might be as simple as that. And I look at a shitload of images. I love Arena. I used to love Tumblr. And it's like remixing and combining concepts and artworks. And I don't know, I feel like there's a really interesting... I found that one of the most fruitful things to me is just to take images that resonate for no other reason than they resonate, and then combine them with concepts and written statements, and then just like magic happens from there. Like, I've got a Figma with probably like 260 pages.
Wow.
Where each page is just like doing that for any given thing. And the language, I really obsess about the language and the words around it. Like, hyperstructures is maybe like a really good example of that, which is, that essay came from me being really frustrated having to explain my view of protocols for like months on end. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to write. I want to send a link. I don't want to have to give the same diatribe every time. But it needed a new word to like capture it. And it has to be a word that kind of like hits and resonates and strikes a chord. And I feel like, yeah, like we're starting to do that now with our like enjoy Ethereum is something we're going to probably say every day for the next like 6 months. Because it's like, it's really simple, but I think it hits a
Powerful.
lot of ideas in what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Okay.
And then find people you can share those ideas and bounce around and critique them, whatever.
Okay. This sparked in you random, like quick question. You spend so much time in Figma. Do you have a preferred font weight and kind of like, I guess, typography?
Yeah. Arial narrow, -6% spacing, and then whatever size is needed. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Okay, back on the road. Are there any thoughts or ideas that you feel very strongly about, but a lot of people disagree with?
Oh, yeah, I have a few. I think most protocols, I guess one I've held for a while is like, I think like Uniswap style protocols will be free forever. And if not that instance, some competing instance. I think like the nature of how protocols operate and run, I think they'll likely net to near free. And that there's value captured at the edges, either by people who are participating in the protocols like LPs or platforms built on top of it. And that I think most ERC20 tokens are dead long term. I just have a very strong belief that the ERC20 token model in almost all circumstances for a DAO just is like net worse than maybe an NFT form because of the downstream value system. I think content makes sense on chain. That feels like really obvious, but a lot of people would probably still disagree with that.
Sure.
I think I have an increasingly...
I get hate around that still.
Yeah. I have a strong opinion that maybe one of ones were like really really skeuomorphic, and it was a good era. And I think there'll be ones that survive, but maximizing broad ownership is actually the thing to really optimize for if you can, even at the expense of short-term ETH. I don't know. There's a lot. They're the ones that came to mind.
Okay. My final question for you, because I know we're way over at this point, but this has been so good. I'm stimulated, like completely stimulated. The last question I have for you, Jacob, is knowing what you know now, after building Zora to date, what are some things you wish you knew when you got started?
I think if I was to go back in time and give advice to myself, it's like, do the obvious. I think for like almost all of Zora, maybe till recently, I would optimize on the interesting instead of the obvious, just because I found it interesting and novel. And I think the net result of that is that you'll likely always be early, but maybe too early. I have a greater appreciation. The way the aha moment for me as I was like going through all of my favorite companies of all time was like the Netflix DVD really spoke to me as like a sign of pragmatism, which is Netflix had a really big and grand vision for the future and could see how the internet and streaming would like change film and TV and how it was distributed. But they had the pragmatism to like start with Netflix DVDs and just like literally mailing DVDs to people and like physically distributing them. And that got them started, and that was right for the moment in time, and helped them get towards that larger vision. So I think I have a much greater appreciation for what's short-term viable, and instead of like always choosing the long-term interesting. So that's probably the biggest change I've had. And then I guess this is an obvious one, but like things always take, I feel like if someone says something's going to take 5 years, it's probably going to take 1. If someone says it's going to take 1 to 2 years, it's probably going to take 10. And there's like really no in between. It's like timing is just really hard.
So people say we're expecting adoption in the next 5 to 10 years. You know, they're saying. I'm
like, yeah, for like a lot of things, it might be way quicker.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like the shorter the prediction, the longer it's going to take. The longer the prediction, the shorter it's going to take. That's like you probably get 50% hit rate on that heuristic. But I guess things always take longer than you think, but you can do more in a short period of time than you think too. So that's probably the net outcome of that.
I love it. That's a great place to wrap up. Jacob, this was incredible. Thank you for your time. Part of season 7. I'm glad we got to do this, and we'll be minting this episode as an NFT. We got a sick animation in the works as well that you saw earlier. But before I let you go, where can we find you, Jacob? Where can we learn more? Shill it away.
Just follow Zora. It's go to Zora.co. We can show you the most enjoyable things that are on Ethereum. And then I'm on Twitter, JS_Horn, HORNE.
Amazing.
And yeah, rapid fire tweets, I guess.
Amazing. Till next time.
Cool. Thanks.